The press today and the public often point to political parties as a source of conflict in our government. And they lament the struggles and the battles and the arguments between the Republicans and the Democrats. And we sometimes get the impression that this is a new thing that's been happening, but it's not. We've had political parties in our country virtually from the founding. The Founding Fathers didn't like the idea of political parties. They opposed them. And in Federalist 10, which is in your textbook, talks about the dangers of factions. The Founding Fathers were worried that people would organize into groups, that we would argue against each other, and that we wouldn't join together as a nation. And in part, they were right. People today are very, very critical of political parties. They blame them for most everything that ails our government, and it's really an unfair assessment. There are two things that I think political parties do a particularly good job of, and let me just discuss them briefly. The first is they provide us with voting cues. We don't know everything about every politician. If you've ever gone into a ballot box, you've got people from the president all the way down to local school board and every office in between. There are many names on that ballot that we don't know, and we don't know a thing about them. We've not even heard of some of the people on there. And yet we're expected to elect the city council member from District 14 or the school board for place number 3. How do we make those decisions? Well, we look oftentimes to a letter that's after their name in parentheses. We look for an R or a D, and we make some assumptions. We assume that if there is an R after that person's name, that they represent the ideas of the Republican Party. And if you happen to be a Republican and you see a Republican on the ballot, you take a chance and you make an assumption that you have the same views, and therefore if I vote for this person, they'll represent me appropriately. Conversely, if you're a Democrat and you see a D after their name, you assume that the person represents the ideas of the Democratic Party because they've survived the Democratic primary process, and you must have something in common. So in that sense, political parties serve a very valuable purpose. They help us organize our thoughts and make selections on Election Day. The other important thing that they do is they help us understand issues and help us organize the government. People that serve in our government, with the exception of some members of the judiciary, are openly members of political parties. They either represent the Republicans or the Democrats. They hold offices in the Congress and in the White House. And when we hear them debating particular issues, we gravitate towards the ideas that we believe we represent. Now, increasingly in this country, there's a number of people that claim to be independents. And for political scientists like myself, that's actually a disturbing trend. It may sound cool and intellectual to be independent. That is, I form my own ideas and I'm not beholden to either the Republican or the Democratic Party. But the problem is, independent voters tend not to participate in politics. The level of non-voting among independents is much, much higher than it is among people that claim to be Republicans and Democrats. So the reason this is a concern is as more and more people claim to be independents, it's actually resulted in fewer and fewer people taking part in our elections. And that ultimately is a concern for people that are interested in democracies, because democracies rely on the participation of their citizens.